Another thing I talked to the civilian about was 60 Minutes. And CBS News is front and center in this failure of the press to acknowledge errors. And it's ironic because you now hear people from CBS front and center talking about how they're the defenders of the First Amendment. They're the defenders of the integrity of the journalism business. In the last couple of weeks, you've had the president of CBS News and the head of 60 Minutes both resign because they are upset that CBS, the parent company, is on the precipice of making a deal with Donald Trump to pay him a lot of money to acknowledge something that they did, quote unquote, wrong, which ironically was not wrong. Okay, the parent company needs to settle this because they're trying to get the company to sell the company, and so they need to clear the decks so that the Trump administration doesn't try to hamper the sale. What Donald Trump's upset about is something that, in this case, was not liberal bias. It's ironic, I know. He's upset that they edited Kamala Harris's answers in a CBS segment on 60 Minutes to make her look better, to take a garbled answer, a confusing answer, and clean it up. That's not an example of liberal bias. It's not an example of trying to help Kamala Harris, although they did plenty of that. It's an example of what happens when you edit a news magazine piece on TV. You clean up the sound bites so that the viewer can understand in a relatively compact way what happened. So now the big outrage at CBS is correct. They're correct to protest this settlement, proposed settlement. They're correct to be concerned. But then they don't look at their own history of things that they did that were extraordinarily biased. And the one this civilian brought up to me was something that most of you have probably forgotten about, which is when Donald Trump did an interview with Leslie Stahl in 2020. And the president brought up Hunter Biden's laptop. CBS did the interview, didn't focus on this exchange, but this exchange is so telling. It's so telling. And you hear Trump people and civilians bring it up all the time, where Leslie Stahl is indignant that Donald Trump is trying to put the laptop front and center. Because at the time, as you'll recall, the press was colluding with Democrats to claim that the laptop was Russian disinformation or clearly tampered with. Listen to how Donald Trump tries to convince Leslie Stahl to focus on Hunter Biden's laptop.
I think it's one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen, and you don't cover it. You want to talk about...
Well, because it can't be verified.
You want to talk about insignificant things.
I'm telling you.
Of course it can be verified. Excuse me, they found the laptop. Leslie.
It can't be verified.
What can't be verified?
The laptop.
Why do you say that?
Because
even the family hasn't... The family on the laptop, he's gone into hiding. For 5 days, he's gone into hiding.
He's preparing for your debate.
Oh, it's taken him 5 days to prepare? I doubt it.
So you can't prove it, but there are a lot of people on the right who say that if the laptop had been covered, not for the pictures of Hunter Biden, in compromising personal situations, but if the laptop had been covered for what it said about Biden Inc. and not censored by social media, dominant media, and the Democrats, Trump might have won the election. A lot of people who believe that. I don't think you can prove it, but a lot of people say it. And here's Leslie Stahl, one of the senior most correspondents at the granddaddy of them all, 60 Minutes, not trying to investigate the laptop and find out what Donald Trump's concerns are, but fighting with him as if she's a spokesperson for the DNC, saying, oh, the laptop's not real, you can't verify it. CBS has never, to my knowledge, acknowledged the professional failure on display, on vivid display in that interview. Never gone back and tried to explain to the public how such a thing could have happened. And again, until you acknowledge past failures and change your ways, as an industry, we're unlikely to get people to believe us when we try to do things like hold Donald Trump accountable. Here's another 60 Minutes moment. Scott Pelley, a recent graduation speech in which he, without naming Donald Trump, gives a catalog of things that he is worried about in the Trump era. And I will tell you, as you listen to it, everything he says, people on the right would say occurred under Joe Biden. Every example, every worry he raises people on the right would say happened under Joe Biden. Let's listen to Scott Pelley of 60 Minutes.
But in this moment, this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts. The fear to speak. In America, the Wake Forest class of 1861, they did not choose their time of calling. The class of 1941 did not choose. The class of 1968 did not choose. History chose them. And now history is calling you, the class of 2025.
Now, to be clear, the concerns that Scott Pelley raised there as they apply to the Trump administration are legitimate and should be debated and discussed, and the press should be aggressive about them in every respect. But to ignore the fact that it's not just the MAGA view, but any objective view, that every one of those concerns was also implicated by the actions of the previous Democratic administration, is to once again send a signal to my civilian friend and tens of millions of others that the press is not concerned about holding Democrats to the same standards. You would never hear a CBS correspondent, unfortunately, deliver a speech like that to a commencement during a Democratic administration. And that's why the press needs to think about it. They need to go back to say, well, how did we cover the Hunter Biden laptop? And then more recently, how did we cover Joe Biden's mental decline? We've talked about this here before. I keep waiting for the press to come clean. All the discussion around this book by Alex Thompson and Jake Tapper is about the so-called Democratic Party cover-up, the White House cover-up. And once again, we have a prominent Democrat going on camera with CBS News and being asked the wrong question. I can't say this enough. Stop asking Democrats, did you see privately Joe Biden display cognitive decline? Because I can tell you what they're all going to say. Not, you got me, I admit it. I saw cognitive decline in private and I never disclosed it. What they're going to say is, I never saw it. It's not the right question. The right question for Democrats is, since you saw the cognitive decline in public the way we did, what did you do about it? And why didn't you do anything about it? And then the question for the media is, what role did our news organization play in the cover-up? Here's Bill Clinton being interviewed by CBS News. He's got a new book out, a new spy novel. But here's Bill Clinton being asked, once again, the wrong question.
Did you ever have a moment with him where you thought maybe he was unfit to run for president? No.
Not
I
the
thought
right
he was
question.
a good president. The only concern I thought he had to deal with was, could anybody do that job until they were 86? And we'd had several long talks. I had never seen him and walked away thinking he can't do this anymore. He was always on top of his brief.
Again, it's possible that whenever Bill Clinton saw him in private, he was on top of his brief. But Bill Clinton watches C-SPAN and cable news, and he saw the same things that you did and I did. Stop asking Democrats if they saw it in private. No one's going to confess. Ask them why they didn't do anything in public. And then, if you're in the media and you want to restore credibility, stop trying to run out the clock. The press is trying to run out the clock and never acknowledge failure, massive failure, epic failure, what I've called the biggest scandal in American media history, and blame it all on a few Biden aides for covering it up and sort of semi-blame other Democrats for not admitting that they saw it in private. This is why the guy I talked to at the birthday party is turning to programs like this, which I'm grateful for. Because how could you watch a place that calls itself a news organization and expect them to cover Donald Trump fairly, tough, but fair, if not only did they cover the previous administration with their head in the sand, because they didn't want to help Donald Trump win and they were intimidated by the Biden team, but won't acknowledge that what they did was wrong and won't think about how to explain to people how they're going to do better. It's appalling. And it's going to happen unless people start to say to news organizations, you need to explain yourself. If you want my business, if you want my eyeballs, if you want my subscription money, if you want me to patronize what you're selling, you have to explain the failure and you have to come clean about it. Leslie Stahl never come clean about the laptop. Scott Pelley never come clean about the abuses of all those same issues under the previous administration.